Hey, good evening, everybody. It's Bird Man Mel, and I'm so very happy you joined me. I hope your week's starting off good. I tell you what, we're going to make it better tonight. You're very lucky because we have two of my friends on that are some of the most incredible birding people I've ever met, and most of all, it's great in the way they share the knowledge they have. Jim and Julie Lundsted have been volunteers with the Conservation Department and other things in mid Missouri where they've shared their knowledge. And we were talking before the program came, guys. What's it been? 20 years we decided we've been doing programs
Yes.
together? Hey,
Yes.
so it's been fun. You're going to love these guys. Like I always do before we jump into there, of course, I got to put in a few commercials and all that stuff. But first, I'm going to mix it up on you. I'm going to ask a question. Woodpeckers have a special spot in old Birdman Mel's heart. And why is that? Think back to Saturday. This is a question for a prize. You're going to get your pick on one of these two houses. Now, I want to say a good word about a friend up in Michigan that builds these for us. But which bird did my son Grant write about at 10 years old? What was his first bird he wrote about? Okay? And we're going to give you a hint. Of course, it might be a woodpecker. I don't know. Just a thought there. But you get that answer and stay on to the very end. We'll have some other things you're going to be eligible for. But well, you're going to have your pick between a flicker house and a woodpecker house that Bill Stovall and his wife way up in Michigan build for us, another one. And I just wanted to shout out to everybody up in that part of the world because Bill and his wife do an incredible job making products, and we're just tickled to death to be able to represent them across the country with their great products. But the other thing I want to remind you is Saturdays, you're going to see Birdman Mel one last time before summer break, and we're going to make it special. It's going to be on butterflies and pollinators, how to attract them to your yard and how to benefit them. But I'm going to have some surprises in my bag. So be prepared to smile, be prepared to win, be prepared to learn a lot. It'll be a program I guarantee you're going to want to share. And then we're going to wrap it up a week from tonight. You wanted Stan Tequila to talk one more time. So Stan's coming back, and he's going to talk hummingbirds a week from tonight. So I'll give you the answer real quick now, since you better had answered already. It was a downy woodpecker. But do tell us where you're from, too. That's another way to win that we like collecting every night. Do share us with a friend. Tag somebody and say, hey, this looks like a good program. And you're going to know it in about 10 seconds because I'm going to count down now and I'm going to just shut up. I didn't even hardly squeeze my birds here. I got all my buddies along. I always like these guys. I always tell you I like these. And they're going to tell you more about what's that crazy old man got in his hand. So, Jim and Julie, welcome to Birdman Live. It's great to have you. You are nationwide now.
Thanks, Mel. What an intro that was. And it has been an awful long time that we've known each other and worked together, and I can't say that there's a better person around to work with than you guys. So thanks for having us. We really appreciate it.
Now I got to jump in after you say that and say thank you. If you guys don't know that these guys know woodpeckers, guys, tell them what you were watching out the window right before we came in. You got to share that with everybody.
Well, you might be stealing our thunder because
Uh-oh.
we may have a video of that later.
Okay, I'll be quiet. Okay.
No. Join in anytime. We love to have you join in.
If you'll go ahead and put our first slide up, please.
So woodpeckers are perhaps one of our most favorite groups of birds. They've fascinated me for so many years, and we started researching them and learning about them, and we learned that there's about 200 species of woodpeckers worldwide. Now, we only have about 16 in North America. And, normally we'd go into how many Missouri has and everything, but no, since we're nationwide, we're going to stick with the nationwide. Primarily, woodpeckers are black and white with splashes of red or yellow, generally. The largest woodpeckers are over 20 inches tall. Ooh. Now, the smallest ones, these little guys are only like 4 or 5 inches tall, which is kind of fun. I would love to see one of those. Those are in the Amazon, and we don't have anything that small around here. The smallest one we have in the United States is probably the downy woodpecker. So next slide. So what makes a woodpecker a woodpecker? Birdman Mel's looking. What makes a woodpecker a woodpecker? Next slide. One of the most fascinating thing, I think, is their feet. Now, if you look at a songbird, songbirds' feet, they have 3 toes forward, 1 toe back. They're perching birds. They sit on a branch all the time. Now, when you see a woodpecker, where do you see the woodpecker?
Clinging.
Clinging, exactly. They're clinging to something. So they have 2 toes forward, 2 toes backwards. So they can hang on to that tree trunk or your bird feeder
Or your bird house.
or your bird house a lot easier. Next slide. Another really cool adaptation about woodpeckers is their tail. Now, normal songbirds have nice, cute little tails that they're there. They don't function for too much. But you look at a woodpecker tail; those feathers are real stiff and long, and they act like a tripod to keep that bird on that tree trunk or on that cool feeder, like that one the Bird Man Mel has right there in front of him. That is one of my most favorite feeders ever. So that acts like a really cool tripod. So they've got those feet that goes 2 toes forwards, 2 toes back, and that stiff long tail that keeps them perched up against that feeder or that tree trunk or that birdhouse.
Gives them a perfect opportunity to use that hard head.
That hard head.
You're talking about the woodpecker now, right?
Right.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay, the next slide. Another cool adaptation is their beak. It's long and pointed, and they use it kind of like a chisel, because woodpeckers, they peck on the wood, right? Now, their beak is so strong, it can hit a tree with a speed of 20 to 30 feet per second. That's like 12, 14 miles an hour.
Woo.
Now, that may not seem fast if you're on the highway, but imagine if that was your noggin hitting that big old tree. That would be hard. That would be fast. That would hurt. And the stop is instant. So when that woodpecker's beak hits the tree, boom, it stops. So their beak is also pretty cool because it's kind of like our fingernails. It continually grows. It's continually growing and growing and growing. Just imagine if they're pecking on that tree trunk, that's going to wear it down some.
Ooh.
And another cool thing that they have are these little tiny feathers all around their nose. What do you think that's for?
Keeps that sawdust out.
Exactly. Good job, Bird Man Mel.
Hey,
Good
got lucky
job.
on that one.
There you go.
Okay, the next slide. Okay, this is perhaps my most favorite aspect about a woodpecker. Their tongues. Their tongue is at least 3 times the length of their bill. Now that's a long, long tongue. And where do you think they can put that long, long tongue? Think it curls up back underneath their throat? No. It actually goes all the way over their head. It goes around their mouth, over their head, and anchors in their right nostril. All the way around their head and anchors in that nostril. So it's a long, long tongue. It splits in the back and then it separates and then it goes right back to their nose. It's basically a muscle and a ligament and a little bit of a bone in there that keeps it going in and out. Now, why do you think they have that awfully long, long tongue? Jim, any ideas?
They're digging for grubs. They're digging for insects under the bark of the tree.
Absolutely. They eat grubs and bugs underneath the bark in the tree. So they're pecking on the tree, making little holes, and then they're sticking that tongue underneath the bark, and they're feeling around in there, and they're finding bugs. And another cool thing about the woodpecker's tongue is the fact that there's little tiny barbs, like fishing hooks, at the end of their tongue. So that will grab onto that grub and pull it right back out of there. And let me tell you, I'm a licensed bird bander, and we put up mist nets, which are very fine nets that the birds can't see, and they'll fly into them. And you have to untangle the bird, and we band them then. And there is nothing like trying to get a woodpecker out of one of those nets that has let his tongue come out.
Oh no. Yeah.
Yeah.
I have honestly ruined a net because I had to cut him out because
Oh my
his
goodness.
tongue was so
Yeah.
Wrapped up.
Oh my
in
goodness.
there. And to prove how sturdy their beaks are, I also have a small scar on my hand from a red belly who beat the tar out of my hand.
Oh goodness.
Yeah.
But that's an aside. Okay, next slide. Okay, so another fun thing about woodpeckers is the fact that they don't really have a song. They don't sing like a bluebird, one of our favorite birds. They would rather go up on our gutter at 6 in the morning maybe.
That's
Of
pretty
course.
late.
Yeah.
Maybe
Well, they want
5:30.
to find, right.
Exactly.
They want to find the tallest, loudest spot that they possibly can in the springtime because this is their song. This is how they're going to attract a mate. So they will go up on these high spots on a tree or on our gutters. And what do? Right. Really, really loud. It's kind of like an alarm clock, a rather rude alarm clock. So they also will do they will drum. They will make these noises so other woodpeckers in the area know, hey, back off, people.
My territory.
My territory.
Right.
A lot of people claim that they can even tell what species of woodpecker it is by their drums. I'm not quite that good, but there are people out there who can do that. Now, they also then will use the beak for excavating this hole. So they're drilling in the tree. They're drilling in the tree for food. They're also excavating a hole and making a cavity. So they're nesting. So if you ever see a hole in a dead tree, which is a great reason to leave a dead tree if it's possible and safe on your property,
Mhm.
but a woodpecker hole is generally perfectly round, except for
The pileated.
the pileated. Theirs, like you see here, is an oval,
A very large oval.
a very, very large oval. And also, between feeding, excavating, and drumming, they can peck 20 times per second, pounding 8 to 12,000 times a day. That's a lot of drumming.
That's worse than a drummer in marching Mizzou. That's tough.
There you go.
Exactly.
Next slide, please.
So we get asked so many times, why doesn't a woodpecker get a headache? Why doesn't a woodpecker get a headache? That's probably one of the top questions that we get.
Next slide, please.
So there's a lot of really cool things that keep a woodpecker in the headache zone. For number one, their skull is much thicker than other birds. Bird bones generally are very porous and very light. They're because the birds are flying, they don't want to be weighed down. For example, a bald eagle only weighs 10, 12 pounds. For a big bird, that's not very much. So a woodpecker, their skull is a lot thicker than other birds, and the bones are very, very porous. They're very spongy. And their neck muscles are extremely strong. So when that beak hits the tree, the neck muscles help absorb some of that shock. Also, the tongue, remember we talked about the tongue that goes all the way around the head, that's back there. So that muscle and that ligament also helps protect and absorb some of that shock. And a lot of things we've read recently that say if this was a person, if we were a person and we were hitting a tree with that force, our eyes would pop out. because of the force. Well, a woodpecker's eyes are very protected. They have an extra eyelid that, number one, helps keep the wood chips out, and number two, helps keep the eyeballs in. So that's kind of a cool thing. The beak also helps keep them out of the no headache zone. Excuse me. It has two layers. There's a bone, and then there's that outer covering that we talked about earlier that is continually growing like our fingernails. And the lower beak is a little bit longer, so that part of that shock is absorbed first on the lower beak and then on the upper beak. So it kind of helps distribute it all throughout the body.
Next slide, please.
And then another really cool adaptation for the woodpeckers is their brain. Okay, so our brain kind of sits like it's a half circle, and it sits kind of flat. So if our head were to go forward, our brain, which is wrapped in cerebral fluid and kind of floats along in there, when our brain would be slammed forward, the brain would go boom, slam forward, instant concussion. A woodpecker's brain is tilted a little bit, so the whole flat side of the brain is faced towards the impact zone
Of the tree.
tree, and it's packed in there really, really tight, so it's not going to move. So that brain is not moving at all.
Next slide, please.
So this part, I know a lot of people don't like the woodpeckers around their house, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But we want to say, how do we attract woodpeckers in? Because quite honestly, we love woodpeckers. As Bird Man Mel and we were sitting here talking right before the presentation, we looked out our window right here, and we were seeing pileated woodpeckers. So we enjoy having the pileated come to our yard. We've been lucky here in Missouri to have all of the woodpeckers come into our yard, all of the woodpeckers that you can attract in Missouri. We've had the downy, hairy, pileated, red-headed, red-bellied, and the yellow-bellied sapsucker.
And of course, Mr. Pileated and his family.
And his family. So there's a lot of ways you can attract woodpeckers in. Suet during the winter, and a special no-melt suet in the summertime, but especially in the winter. Suet attracts woodpeckers like crazy. And the one thing that we feed all year round to attract the woodpeckers is peanuts. And there are several feeders that we have, and both of them are pictured in there. The one in the middle, the tube feeder with peanuts in it, is perhaps one of the ultimate favorites. And in the upper right, the wooden one that has like a double mesh on it to keep the peanuts in, and it's got holes on the side. It's perfect for woodpeckers. Other birds also enjoy this. Here in Missouri, we have the tufted titmouse, chickadees, nuthatch,
Carolina wren. Occasionally, even a bluebird will come take a peanut.
Exactly.
It's not common, but a tremendous variety.
Right. A lot of birds will also enjoy the stuff that you put out for woodpeckers. And one thing I do want to point out is notice that one of our favorite feeders is the suet feeder that has that perch down on the bottom, like Bird Man Mel has, that helps the woodpecker with that tripod
with the stiff tail.
Come and enjoy the suet in that feeder. So those are our favorite types of videos, or favorite types of feeders, excuse me. And if you can we show them the video that I got a little bit ago this morning?
Yep. Getting ready to crank her up. There you go.
Okay.
Now what's going on there? Is it still going?
Is it going? Because we can't see it.
Yeah, it's going. Yep. We got to see. Tell everybody what was going on.
Okay, what that was a juvenile pileated or pileated, both are correct pronunciations. He was on our pergola in our backyard, and he was waiting for Dad to come in there, and Dad was over on the peanut feeder stocking up, and then he went and fed the little baby, quote unquote, the juvenile woodpecker. Now, mind you, these guys are about a foot tall, so it's kind of hard to say baby when he's a foot tall woodpecker.
Yeah.
But
if you take a moment and spend some time looking on the internet, you can see video stories of pileated woodpeckers feeding their young in that large oval on a tree. And it's funny when you see a woodpecker feed, because it looks like they're jamming that beak so far into the young that they would be hurting them, but they're actually depositing the food down their gullet so they can actually eat it. And it's pretty fun to watch. That video, if you noticed, one of the birds had kind of a spiky hair.
Mm-hmm.
That's the juvenile, the one with the unruly haircut.
Okay. It's the same in every species, isn't it?
Isn't it though?
There's somebody in every group.
Yep.
Let's go back to the next slide.
And that's what we enjoy about feeding, especially in the summertime, is when they do bring all the youngsters in like this. So we thought we wanted to talk about, spend a few minutes and talk about some of our favorite species of woodpeckers.
Okay, next slide, please.
So one of our favorites is the downy. Now, downies, pretty much everybody in the United States can get a downy woodpecker. They're our smallest little guys, maybe about 4 inches, 5 inches, around in there. Yes, Bird Man Mel's looking around going, which one of these is my downy? There we go. And you'll notice the picture in the middle, that is a juvenile. So you're seeing a lot of them right now. The juvenile has a little red cap on. The male has the red on the back of his head. The female doesn't have any red. And the juveniles have that cute little red cap. So the next slide. So the next one of our favorites is the hairy woodpecker. And I wanted to spotlight the downy and the hairy because both of these are fairly coast to coast. Most people will get them. But one of the other questions that we always get is, how do you tell, next slide, the difference between a hairy and a downy woodpecker?
I know, teacher.
Oh,
I
go,
know.
Mel, go, Mel. You
Harry,
might win a prize.
Harry is huge, is what I learned, with a big old beak.
Well, and that is true. Now, if they always would travel together, like in that middle picture, it would be so easy to tell them apart. But you know what? They don't travel like this. They should, but they don't. So there's subtle differences with their markings, but the way I always tell them apart is by their beak. So if you look at those two together, the downy woodpecker's beak is about half the length of its head. The hairy woodpecker's beak is about the length of his head. So that to me is the easiest way to tell those two species apart. Otherwise, they must travel together like this. I think it should be a rule.
Although it's fun, if you feed and you feed consistently, we do get both on the feeder at the same time. So occasionally you will get that reward to give you that middle picture, but it's challenging, and that's one of birding 101 for people just starting out admiring woodpeckers.
Right.
That's a great
Next slide,
photo.
please. Yeah.
Okay, so also a bird that is fairly coast to coast is the northern flicker. Now there's a couple of races of northern flicker. We have the yellow shafted, which is
east of the Rocky Mountains.
East of the Rocky Mountains. And we get the yellow shafted flickers here in Missouri. One cool thing I think about the flickers is they are a species of woodpecker that you'll see on the ground a lot. Does anybody know why? They like to eat ants. So you'll see them on ant mounds quite a bit. So the next slide is the other flicker, northern flicker, the red-shafted flicker. Now, there is an overlap area where you can see both the red shafted and the yellow shafted, like in Kansas, Colorado, that
Extreme
area.
western Kansas and along the Rocky Mountains are where they both occur.
Right. Now, I will put a little disclaimer there that one time I have seen a red shafted in my backyard in Jefferson City, Missouri. So you will get an occasional or a hybrid of the red shafted, yellow shafted. So
Next slide, please.
So we had to throw in the pileated woodpecker or the pileated because they are truly one of our favorite birds. And what is so amazing to me, no matter when I see one, no matter how many times I see one, they take my breath away because they are so large. Now, if anybody could recognize perhaps who might have been modeled after a pileated woodpecker?
Cartoon character, perhaps?
Woody Woodpecker.
Exactly, Woody Woodpecker. And I will say that this picture was taken in our backyard a few years ago, where the male and female came in the wintertime and decided to snack on some suet together, which is a rare occurrence. They don't seem to travel together too terrible much. Next slide. Another one of our favorite birds is sapsuckers. Now, sapsuckers are so cool. And besides, it's fun to say the sapsucker that we get here in Missouri, the yellow-bellied sapsucker. It just makes me laugh every time I say yellow-bellied sapsucker. There are 4 species of sapsuckers in the United States, in North America. Next slide.
It's up.
Sapsuckers have a cool way of eating. They won't come to your peanut feeder. What they like to do is go to trees and they drill holes, a lot of holes, exactly, all the way around your tree generally. And why they're doing that, they're called sapsucker wells. The sap then, in a day or two, starts to come out those holes. The sapsucker will come back, use that brushy little tongue of his, and soak up some of that fresh sap coming out of the tree. Additionally, in the springtime, it will attract some bugs, some little gnats and other assorted insects, and lots of migratory birds, such as I've seen a prothonotary warbler, I've seen yellow warblers, all going to the sapsucker wells to eat the bugs and sometimes drink the nectar. But it's always kind of exciting when you come across a tree, I think, with sapsucker wells drilled into them. And they do not harm the tree. I mean, you know, we tap the tree to get sap, so why can't the sapsucker, right?
Makes sense.
There's a lot of wells, but all of our reading says that the traditional use does not harm the tree. And we have a fairly large walnut tree in the backyard where you saw the pileated woodpecker that the sapsuckers have worked for years, and it's still standing. Next slide, please.
Finally, one of our really most favorite birds that we don't get to see very often because they're out more California, Arizona.
Birds of the Southwest.
They're called acorn woodpeckers.
They are cool.
Number one, acorn woodpeckers are adorable. And I have to say that middle picture of the acorn woodpeckers on the hummingbird feeder, that came to me yesterday from my niece in California, Janelle. Her and Adeline, her daughter, sent me that picture so I could include it in our presentation tonight. So thank you guys, I appreciate that. Acorn woodpeckers, to me, they look comical, kind of like a clown. They almost look like they're startled all the time. But what's so cool about acorn woodpeckers is they tend to hang out in a family group. And you can tell by those pictures what they like to do.
They're thrifty.
They are thrifty. They like to drill a lot of holes in a tree and they stuff them full of acorns, and they're caching them, or they're keeping them for the winter. And what's so fun is they will tend to these acorns for, months and months and months. They will go to each individual hole and they will turn the acorn to keep them from getting rotten. They'll turn it and they'll turn it and they'll turn it, and they'll tend to those, and then they'll fill them again when they eat them. So acorn woodpeckers, to me, they're fascinating, they're beautiful, and they're kind of silly.
They're smart.
And if you get a chance.
And they're smart, yeah.
And if you get a chance to go birding in the Southwest, that's one you should look for. It's really special to find a cache tree. So we'll try to wrap this up, Mel, so we don't push your time here too much. Our next slide, please. We'll talk about some ways to stop woodpecker damage on your home. First off, and we recognize that not everybody is excited to have a woodpecker drilling on their house. None of us are real excited at that 5:30 in the morning awakening, but they really don't damage your gutter. That's just a very convenient place to drum. But what we do is we provide a food source that is away from the house so that they are not inclined to stand on the house. One of the suggestions is to present food and move it further and further and further from your house to a place where you can enjoy the woodpeckers, but they're not necessarily hanging out on your siding or on your deck. Another thing you can do, of course, is to put something outside like a set of chimes that makes noise that startles the woodpecker and will keep them from hanging out on your deck or right next to your house. Cover the wood? Well, that's an interesting challenge, but I have a friend who put up concrete siding on his house. He was unable to keep the woodpeckers from constantly drilling his home in the edge of the woods. So he finally changed his siding out to a concrete-based siding that they don't particularly care to drill in. Two last things. Sometimes a distraction like tinfoil streamers or a pie plate, an aluminum pie plate, something hanging, or a decoy like that owl that's pictured may help. This is an area where we encourage people to consider talking to your local small bird store for help, because this is a regional thing. I can give you great advice for Missouri, but it probably won't help you in Maine or upper New York State or Ohio or necessarily in the Midwest, any outside of the Midwest. So this is where you take advantage, build that relationship with your local bird store where you get the great food that attracts the woodpeckers. Then you can talk about how do we feed them, yet feed them away from our house so that we can truly enjoy them. They're great to see. They're fun to enjoy. They're a birder's first encounter, I think, with a noisemaker that you will love for the rest of your life. But some people have had bad experiences. So with that, Mel, let's see. We have one more slide called Final Fun Facts. Do we have time?
Sure.
Final fun facts. So woodpeckers create new holes every year, but their old holes are used by other cavity nesting birds. Chickadees, owls, titmouse, bluebird, nuthats, all of those are called secondary cavity nesters. So they depend on the woodpecker. Therefore, leaving that dead tree that is safe and won't harm anybody, leaving that dead tree is really a good thing. And I was always amazed at some of my birder friends who see a bird flying and say, oh, that's a woodpecker right off the bat. Well, little did I know, and I later learned, that they all fly the same. A typical flap, 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 glide, flap, 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 glide, kind of an undulating kind of flight. And one final woodpecker fact is they'll lay 2 to 8 white eggs, and both parents incubate, which is unique because species like the bluebird, only the female incubates. So go woodpeckers. They got to share the load, right?
There you go. Absolutely. Guys, absolutely a fabulous job. I'm really happy because you got to come by sometime. I got this big old dead tree out in one of the lots where several of us live, and a couple of my neighbors are thinking, what is that crazy old man doing? So I'm going to kind of just tell them, hey, check out this session. These guys will tell you why I'm doing that, okay?
Absolutely.
But
absolutely.
Thank you, guys. And folks, keep sending in questions. Jim and Julie are both going to stay on for a little bit to answer those. And guess what? Sometimes when Bird Man Mel doesn't know some photo or something you send in, these are really the smart guys. These are the guys I send it to for help. So I'm just so happy to finally confess that and to have them on with us tonight. And just want to thank you all for being with us. Absolutely a great program. I hope next fall, when we get back together, to have these guys back. Let me know what you think. But my guess is you're like the people in Central Missouri. You absolutely love the style of how Jim and Julie educate us on how you attract birds, but just a great biology, anatomy lesson too, guys. So just an incredible job. And I want to thank all of you for tuning in. I want to thank our help here. Jeffrey and Miss Kaylee came in to help us one more time tonight before she sneaks off on a little vacation. So appreciate you being here for all those broadcasts, and just appreciate you all so much. We'll be drawing and posting those prizes. And don't forget, this Saturday is the last chance you get to listen to this old man. During the summer break, we'll be back in August when the hummers are humming all over the country and easy to feed on your finger. We'll talk about that later on. But Saturdays, pollinators and butterflies and a lot of fun stuff. And then a week from tonight, stand tequila and hummingbirds. So I just want to thank you again for coming. And as I end every single session, remind you, nature is a stress reliever from God. Take time tonight to listen to the birds sing. Folks, thank you so much for tuning in.